going through a basic introduction of the jury system in the UK to set a basis of understanding for the questions and problems with the jury system posed later on by my friends. Briefly, the jury system is one that has its origins rooted in the courts of Anglo-Saxon England in the Middle Ages, where the judges, like jurors, were composed of laymen. The system was further favoured by King Henry II over the then widely used trial by ordeal. Thereafter, the right to a trial by jury was enshrined in English law by the Magna Carta in 1215. They would decide on the form of proof, whether testimony, documents, compurgation, ordeal or battle that would settle a dispute. As such, we can see that the jury comes from the outset of a judicial body that has lasted to this day, despite the minimizing amount of cases that opt for trial by jury. Today, juries serve as arbiters of fact, deciding on the facts of a case based on evidence provided in court. Throughout this process, the judge need only advise the jury on the relevant law to be applied to the facts of the case. The verdict given thereafter is solely based on a unanimous or majority vote by the jurors who rightfully deliberate independently, uninfluenced by any promise and unintimidated by any threat as a matter of principle as per decided in R.M. Kenner. The jury is, according to Lord Devlin, the lamp that shows that freedom lives, the place of bargain between the law and the people, attending upon not only the accused, but also upon the justice and humanity of law, upholding a symbol of participative democracy and the concept of the rule of law that lies within the heart of the legal system. In the UK, the right to an impartial jury does not mean a panel designed to be impartial, but one drawn by chance from the citizenry. As according to the 1965 report of the Departmental Committee on Jury Service, a jury should represent a cross-section drawn at random from the community and should be the means of bringing to bear on the issues the corporate good sense of that community. From the random nomination of 15 persons down to the final 12 good men and true who actually sit on the jury's bench, it is believed that they are likely to be a cross-section of the people as a whole, and thus representing the views of the common man. Here, it is then also important to note that certain information about the defendants are withheld from the jurors. For example, previous convictions, to prevent undermining the integrity of a jury trial. As such, jurors are given explicit instruction throughout the trial process to not discuss their case with anyone other than a fellow juror and to not seek information from external sources. Moving on, the selection process of jurors starts with a computer from the Jury Central Summoning Bureau randomly selecting people from the electoral register between the age range of 18 and 75 who have resided in the UK for at least 5 years. The computer, which is linked to the police national computer, runs checks on past criminal records, which further helps filter the jury disqualification process. Moreover, after the April 2005 reform, the selection pool has widened to include the judges, magistrates, police, barristers and solicitors, and even the clergy. However, both the defense and prosecution reserve the right to challenge the jury. The defense does so by way of peremptory challenges, which has long since been abolished by the Criminal Justice Act 1988, and challenges for cause, whereas the prosecution does so by way of asking the jurors to stand by. However, the decision to stand by is carefully controlled. Firstly authorized by the Director of Public Prosecution, who then reports to the Attorney General for approval. Basis for challenge has to be grounded on proper justification. So, while we do know the legal process which guides the decision-making of the jury and what happens in the courtroom itself, the law, the Contempt of Court Act confidentiality clause prevents us from examining and questioning the jury's deliberation and how they got to that very decision behind closed doors even after the trial is over. From this stance, we then stand to question whether the decisions of the jurors are influenced by the internet or whether they are racially biased, or in the event of noticing improper conduct in the jury room, do they actually know what to do to ensure a fair trial?
jury system indeed help out a lot for English legal system, but also receive some criticisms too. Racism is the hot issue in the contemporary world, and therefore it also can be found in jury system, although it should be fair to everyone. Alleged inequalities in the criminal justice system have been an issue for many years. Yet there are some who feel the system has yet to be modified to ensure equality for all. Although stereotypes and perceptions are things that everyone possesses, possessing negative ones can be injurious, such as assuming an individual is guilty based on such characteristics. Even in the US, issue of racial discrimination in the criminal justice system became an issue for national debate during 1950 to 1960. In UK, the Contempt of Court 1981 Section 8 Subsection 1 prevents direct investigation of jury deliberation and no research on jury race issue using simulated juries. Previously, there was a survey conducted which is ethnic minority in the criminal court's perception of fairness and equality of treatment. It interviewed 778 ethnic minority defendants, and nearly a third of those complained of unfair treatment. 20% of the black defendants thought the jury was unsympathetic to or racially biased against them. There is a common stereotype such as black people are aggressive and violent, do not respect to the law, and undisciplined in their private life. Asians are famous for their tricks to lure someone, Muslims are terrorists, and Jews are greedy. In other words, the citizens who are not white in skin color often so have a bad impression in everyone's mind. Since that we cannot leave behind all the prejudices while we are entering the jury system, therefore we cannot expect black people to believe that they will be judged fairly by the jury. The jury system is a random system and the defendant have no right to ask for a similar race of juror in the trial. This can merely support the belief that such attitudes are institutionalized. This is indicated by the McPherson report which stated that the police force is institutionally racist. In the case of Kudip Center, it is also believed that there is racial element because one of the jurors wrote a note to the judge regarding that there is a juror had made racist jokes openly during the trial. In the case, the jurors were being warned by the judge about impartiality and the trial continued with the same jurors. In the end, the Asian defendant was found guilty and sought for appeal, but the appeal was dismissed. We can also see racial element in the case of R.M. Mirza. The defendant in this case was also an Asian who had been settled in England for 13 years, but first language was not English. Therefore, he was provided with an interpreter throughout his trial. The jury convicted the defendant by majority, but soon there was a letter from juror which mentioned about there may be racial element in the jury's verdict. In both cases, the court held that the appeal was to be dismissed because after the verdict has been delivered, things said by jurors which were intrinsic to their deliberation were inadmissible. Such privacy permitted full and frank debate and protect the jury from reprisal and harassment. Court also tried hard not to let racial stereotyping on the defendant happen in the justice system, while Lord Justice Aug recommends that where races is likely to be relevant to an issue of importance in a case, a scheme should be devised to provide a system of selecting a jury consisting of up to 3 people from any ethnic minority group. However, it is hard to achieve since jury system is random, and to let a member for BME group become a jury need to have at least 10% of the population in the entire jury catchment area. In the recent year, there's another research by Cheryl Thomas which is Are Juries Fair? The case simulation was conducted with 41 all-white juries at Winchester and Nottingham Crown Courts. The study found out that verdicts of all-white juries did not discriminate against black and minority ethnic defendants, but the members of BME group are more likely to be stopped and searched. In the study, we can find that all-white juries were more likely to convict white defendants when the victim is from a BME group. Furthermore, the differences in jury conviction rates for different specific offences suggest that juries try defendants on the evidence and law, but not racial stereotyping. However, there may be some uncovered part in her research, which is the experience of race shapes in jury trials is in UK. Therefore, we cannot conclude that the jury system now is fair by not racial stereotyping the defendant, but looking at the decreasing rate, it is fair to a certain extent.
The fairness of jury trials depends on jurors trying cases based on the evidence presented in court and the law as directed by the judge. However, over the last decades, numerous instances of jurors researching their cases and disclosing trial information on social media have led to the prosecution and imprisonment of jurors and a growing concern amongst the judiciary about how to control juror access to the internet and social media and prevent mistrials. In 2015, a new statutory criminal offences of juror misconduct were created in the Criminal Justice and Courts Act in an effort to address these concerns following a review by the Law Commission. In the case of R against Karakaya, which happens in 2005, the defendant, Adam Karakaya, stood trial for repeatedly raping and indecently assaulting a 14-year-old girl. The girl gave evidence against him and the jury found Karakaya guilty. After the verdict, however, a jury bailiff found that internet prints out in the jury room, including several about the difficulty of obtaining rape convictions. The case went on to the Court of Appeal, where the Lord Judge and two other Lord Justices decided that the conviction was unsafe. He was acquitted in a retrial. The judge stated that the introduction of extraneous material into the jury room contravened very well-established principles. While the internet has many benefits and we do not mean to diminish its value, it can, however, provide material which may influence a juror's views. If used for research purposes during the trial, it can just as easily influence the juror's mind as a discussion with a friend or neighbor. Since the Karakaya case, judges now give explicit introductions at the beginning of a trial that jurors should not look up anything connected with the case on the internet, and in the most serious cases, sometimes repeat this instruction at the end of the day's proceedings. The influence of internet on jury trials can be seen in the case of death of baby P. The high-profile trial last year of the death of baby P involving Stephen Barker, Jason Owen and Tracy Connolly, the defendants ultimately convicted of causing the death of baby P, which is Peter Connolly. Peter Connolly was a 17-year-old English boy who died in London in 2007 after suffering more than 50 injuries over an 8-month period. The trial was almost jeopardized by the internet sites which revealed their identities and campaigned for justice in the case. The authorities were forced to take unprecedented steps to restrict details available online, with the Attorney General, police, prosecutors and lawyers all working to ensure prejudicial information was removed from the internet. Such efforts to police the information available does not always prevent jurors from doing private research, however. One of the jurors approached a journalist at the end of the trial asking which paper she wrote for and then complimenting her report as a very good summary of events. The juror admitted that they had found out more important background by doing some surreptitious Googling.
The media most affected the high-profile O.J. Simpson trial the most was by making the trial a race issue. Questions such as can a black man receive a fair trial began to be asked. According to Charles J. Ogletree Jr., a professor at Harvard Law School, he saw the coverage of the trial as a complete destruction of the legal system of the United States and admits that by making the trial an issue of race, news sources were able to push more stories and in turn affect the trial. It is important to remember that the jurors in the case were exposed to the extensive media coverage as well. There is no way that this did not affect them. Therefore, this leads to an unlawful decision.
Oh, you know that the famous actor O.J. Simpson killed his wife and the friend?
Oh my god!
Oh my god.
It is undeniable that juries are a fundamental pillar to our justice system, but many believe that jurors are now routinely accessing and distributing so much prejudicial information online that the very integrity of the system is in danger. Instances of jurors using search engines such as Google and and social networking sites such as Twitter and Facebook is compromising the strict rule that the only information available to them must have been carefully vetted by lawyers so as not to be prejudicial or likely to unfairly influence the verdict.
Misconduct of racial bias and usage of internet has been explained by my fellow friends. It's important to know how the jurors should react when misconduct like this happen during deliberation. Moreover, there are actually other actions by jurors that could actually be seen as improper conduct. For example, convicting the defendant just because they wanted to go home, convicting the defendants because they are asylum seekers, or even when they think the defendant probably did it. So, what should the jurors do about that? Before going into what should jurors do, when there's a presence of improper conduct in jurors' room, it's important to know what is deliberation and juror room. Deliberation is a process of jurors gathering around and discuss the verdict that will be given to the convicted person after listening to the trial and taking into the evidence provided. The discussion of verdict will be taking place in a room called jury room, and the discussion or any statement made in the jury room will be kept as secret. Because jury privacy is a vital aspect of ensuring that full and frank deliberation occurs, but it also impedes our ability to review the jury's approach to the evidence. This so-called secrecy of jury room has been laid out in Section 8, Subsection 1 of Contempt of Court Act 1981, which stated that it is a contempt to court to obtain, disclose or solicit any particulars of statement made, opinion expressed, argument advanced, votes cast by members of a jury in the course of their deliberation in any legal proceeding. Besides that, there is also common law principle regarding to secrecy of jury room, expressed by Lord Justice Bankers in ELS against the Heard. The common law rules holds that after the verdict has been delivered, evidence directed to matters intrinsic to the deliberation of jurors is inadmissible. So what should the jurors do when there's any improper conduct from other jurors? Should they tell the judge, the lawyer, or their mother? This issue has been first seen in the case which has been mentioned by Cindy, R against Zha, where the facts were such that after the trial has ended, half the jury wrote a letter of trial counsel in which it was claimed that other members of juries had been biased against the defendant on racial and cultural grounds. And when the case was being appealed in House of Lords, it has been held that investigation of what happened in jury room will be hindered by Section 8 of Contempt of Court Act 1981, and also by the common law rule because the verdict has already been given and what happened in jury room will not matter anymore. This issue was then occurred in the case of R against Smith, where in this case, Lord Justice Kaswa has established exception of common law rules and allowed investigation to be carried out. Those exceptions are if an allegation is made which tends to show that jury as a whole declined to deliberate at all, but decided the case by other means such as drawing lots or tossing a coin. This can be seen in R against Young, where the jurors used Ouija board to reach verdict.
Who killed you?
Oh my god, is it Young?
How? Shot? Should we vote guilty tomorrow? Yes!
The second exception is when the jury is alleged to have been affected by what are termed extraneous influences, for example, contact with other persons who may have passed on information which should not have been before the jury. Lastly, when complaints have been made during course of trial of improper behavior or bias on the part of juror, judges have on occasion given further instruction to the juries or asked them if they feel able to continue with case and give verdict in proper manners. So after the case, it can be seen that Section 8, Subsection 1 of Contempt of Court Act 1981 will not longer be a bar to court to carry out necessary investigation regarding to matters of jury's consideration in the case. Therefore, this exception provided the jurors the option to inform the trial judge about the misconduct of jury before the verdict is given. However, in the case of R against Smith, it has not resolved the issue of juror raising matters of improper conduct in jury room after the case had been completed. But this has been resolved in the case of Attorney General against Scotcher, which a juror wrote a letter to the mother of one of the convicted men, stated that the juror convicted her son because they wanted to go home for tea.
I'm so sick of water, I need tea.
The mother then passed this to their solicitor and it has been raised in court of appeal, but was rejected as Scotcher was then being charged with contempt of court. The court upheld that the secrecy of jury rooms should remain paramount, but this is the first time court recognised that the need to advise jurors on what to do when they are involved in an unfair trial. Now the jurors are allowed to raise the issue without having the fear of being charged with contempt of court, as they can now safely alert the judicial authorities by contacting the clerk of the court or jury bailiff. Or they can also send a sealed letter to the court via an outside agency, and after that, it's up to the judge to do the investigation. In conclusion, it can be seen that even though the Section 8, Subsection 1 of Contempt of Court Act 1981 has prevented the jurors from raising issue on the misconduct happened in jury room, but throughout the development of law, there has been certain circumstances where the jurors are able to inform the court without taking the risk of breaching the law. Thus, when there are misconduct happening in jury room, the jurors should inform the court about the improper conduct.
So in conclusion, while the implemented jury system is made and structured to be as fair as possible, it is inevitable that there will be occurrences of unfairness that happen out of the legal system's control, despite their best efforts to reform and adapt the jury system regarding acts of misconduct and unfairness during deliberation. Furthermore, considering the lack of data available around the secrecy of the jury room, it is indeed hard to deduce the extent that racial bias or accessibility to the internet influences the decisions of jurors. But from what little data and research that has been gathered, it would seem for now that racial bias and stereotyping have not been major influencing factors on jury verdicts. As for the presence of an all-surrounding internet in a modern context where information quite literally lies at our fingertips, it undeniably poses a huge risk to the fairness of a trial. However, with amendments and regulations put into place with the uttermost caution to oversee the process, the jury system as it is today is fair for the most part. Thank you.
Go.
Thank you, Miss Sarata, for watching our video,
And we
I hope you like it. Bye.
1, 2, 3.
Shut up lah!
Wait, go first.
1, 2, 3, action. 1, 2, 3, action.
In the case of R against Karakaya, can I cut? I forgot what I want to say.